All right, team. Welcome to the MMOA podcast. I'm Macy Bolt, an outpatient PT and a TA with the MMOA division of ICE Physio. I had a different episode planned for today, but last week I had a patient encounter that I'd really like to kind of unpack and debrief with you all. And I have some takeaways that I think we can all benefit from as healthcare providers. So, to set the stage, the patient that I was working with is a 75-year-old man. We'll call him Harry for the purposes of tonight. And he has an incredibly medically complex history. He's had a really, really rough few years as far as just general health, medical complications. Within the last 2 years, he had a kidney transplant. 3 days after his transplant, he ended up having a heart attack requiring a cabbage. And most recently has been fighting kind of this ongoing diverticulitis, bowel infections, and ultimately they have him scheduled for an upcoming colectomy to try and get all of that under control. Since his heart attack a few years ago, he has regularly been participating in cardiac rehab, and they are actually the ones who sent him to PT about 6 months ago because they were noticing and he was reporting increased unsteadiness, more falling, and a general kind of loss of strength compared to what his norm was, despite him doing cardiac rehab and getting more active post heart attack. So, for the last 6 months, he and I have been really diligently working on improving his functional strength, getting him more confident with floor transfers and how to fall safely, working on balance training. And my God, is this man a hard worker? I have almost never in my career worked with someone who is so just raring to go. Anything I ask him to do, he is 100% in, no matter how difficult it is, no matter if he feels like he's going to fail, he is willing to try anything I ask him to do. We really can all aspire to be like Harry when we grow up. So, in the process of our course of care, because of his cardiac history, we have done extensive vitals assessment to kind of assess his specific response to exercise, and talked a lot about RPE in the process and kind of correlating, what his vitals are doing in real time with how he is feeling so that he and I have a pretty good idea of, when he's hitting intensity, and what that looks like as he is moving further away from that initial cardiac event and moving more toward truly a fitness realm of recovery and getting stronger. So, the kind of general framework for a lot of our sessions is that he and I work toward a 7 or an 8 out of 10 RPE with our activities. He lets me know when we've hit that point, or I can see that he has hit that point, and then we rest and we return back to a 2 out of 10 RPE for most of his activities. We have found that that is a really successful kind of schema for us to frame our sessions around, and that allows us to really hit that intensity every time I see him, regardless of, if he's having a good day, if he's having a bad day, kind of a thing, because that RPE really lets him kind of dictate how he's feeling. So, when we are getting to this point in our plan of care where he's further out from some of those more medically complex events, we usually start our session by taking baseline vitals, and then we measure with RPE throughout the session unless something goes wonky, feels weird, and he starts having some other symptoms. Then we will absolutely measure vitals during and throughout the session as well. He is a really good gauge of his own intensity at this point, and he knows when he feels like, okay, I need more recovery. I need a little more rest this round, that kind of thing. So he and I have kind of a good system down as far as that goes. So that brings us to the session last week when I saw him. So Harry came in for his appointment and he looked generally unwell. Of note, his colectomy is coming up about a month from now. And so he has been having some GI upset due to this. And of course, it's cold, flu, and sickness season. And so, we're just kind of talking like, what kind of unwell are you feeling? He didn't look good. He was a little bit kind of grayish, just looked like just off from what his norm is. So we start talking about, how he's feeling, getting his baseline vitals, getting the basics done. So for his baseline vitals, his resting heart rate was 80 beats per minute. His blood pressure was 142 over 64, which is well within his general normal range. And his SpO2 was 99. So very good. Overall, little bit elevated with the blood pressure, but nothing that's making me run for the hills at all. Then things changed because he looked at me and he said, Macy, right now I feel like I'm living at an 8 out of 10. And he was using the RPE scale to indicate to me that he felt like he was giving his near max effort to sit in front of me and have this conversation. So that's when alarm bells start to ring for me. And I'm like, something's off here. Even though his vitals aren't telling me like we have a problem, he is telling me based on his RPE, we have a problem. So after more questioning, he was also having some kind of numbness and tingling into his arms. He had a mild headache he really couldn't pinpoint, and just some other strange symptoms. So I have the benefit of working in an outpatient facility that's attached to a hospital. And ultimately, what ended up happening is that I took him over to the emergency department for further evaluation. He was incredibly resistant to this, and he is a very stubborn man and did not want to end up back in the hospital because he had been hospitalized a few months before, and it was not a great experience. And so it took quite a bit of convincing on my end. But as it turns out, I'm even more stubborn than Harry is. And my gut was telling me something is off here based on what he was reporting and just how he was presenting that day. So he ended up, after being evaluated in the ED at our facility, he ended up being transferred to our cardiac service in a neighboring city and having a cardiac cath procedure done that same day, to have a stent placed because he had a 95% blockage in his widowmaker artery. His cardiologist told him before the procedure that he was likely hours to maybe a couple of days away from having a massive cardiac event that very likely could have taken his life. And all of this was happening in the background with vitals that were within what we would consider safe for a patient to present with in an outpatient kind of setting. His report of RPE was the only sign, other than some of those other questions that I asked about during my visit, that triggered me to know that something was off with him. So he came back to see me today, actually, and with tears in his eyes, he looked at me and he said, I probably would not be here today if it weren't for you pushing me to go be evaluated that day. And then he thanked me for being stubborn. So, my big takeaways from this case are number one, vitals are absolutely vital. And Dustin spoke to that last week in his podcast about the MI, where we have to be taking vitals for these patients. And had I not been taking Harry's vitals over the last 6-7 months since I've been seeing him, I wouldn't know what his normal ranges were to even compare off of. So vitals are vital, but in some cases, they do not tell us the whole story of what's going on. So if they are not matching the presentation of the patient in front of you, you have got to dig deeper for these people. And that leads to number two, which is trust your gut. We have a lot of knowledge, and we know when patients are looking good, and we know when patients are looking bad. When things feel off, there is usually a reason for it. And if I hadn't trusted my gut that day, that patient might not be here. And then number three, educating my patient on how to rate his RPE throughout the last 6 months of our plan of care allowed him and I to really have a common language and a common communication style for him to tell me he was not feeling good and he was feeling extreme exertion in a context where he should not have been feeling extreme exertion. That ultimately is what triggered me and his other providers to act and to help him get the care that he needed in order to show up to my clinic this week and be able to participate in PT. So in this case, RPE was more than just a tool for us to gauge intensity. It literally saved Harry's life last week. So I can't emphasize enough, some of these things that feel like maybe just a documentation tool for us to show, yes, we're getting that intensity. They're more than that. They give our patients another way to communicate with us how they're feeling. And that is invaluable. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. And if you want to get more practice implementing exercise and monitoring intensity and learning more about how to better treat older adults, join us at an upcoming live course. So we'll be in Carson City, Nevada this coming weekend, Crescent City, Louisiana on February 22nd, and Sparks Glencoe, Maryland on March 15th. And there are a ton of courses across the country in the upcoming year. So check out the website, check out the ICE Physio app, and join us soon.